Hello, my name's Andy Bower at Object Arts, and I'd like to show you another demonstration of some of the features in Dolphin Smalltalk. Today I'd like to take you through the way of interfacing with a COM component or an ActiveX component from Dolphin. We like to think that the ActiveX interface in Dolphin is one of the best in the software development business, not just in the world of Smalltalk but also possibly in other development tools as well. And I'd like to show you why that is. Okay, I'm going to do this in the community edition of Dolphin, which is the free version, so you can follow along if you like. What I'm going to do is I'm going to generate an interface for the iTunes ActiveX control, and so if you are going to follow along, what you're going to need to do is to install iTunes on your machine if you don't already have it. So I've launched the community edition of Dolphin. Now we're going to use one of the tools here in the additional tools folder, and it's called the ActiveX component wizard, and this is used to generate Smalltalk interface classes to COM objects. So I choose that menu option and we get the wizard up. These are the COM controls that are already loaded into your image. We're going to load a new one. Click the browse button. And now let's look for the iTunes type library. And we choose OK. And you notice it's loaded this type library for us. Now if we click the next button, it takes us to a page where it asks for various parameters about the classes that we're going to generate. Now by default, the component wizard will prefix all of the classes with a particular prefix code, in this case iTunes lib. I typically like to turn this off because it makes things easier to read. You might want to put this back on again if you actually find that those classes you generate tend to conflict with other ones that are already in the image. All of the classes are going to be generated and put into a default package, which in this case is called iTunes lib. So if I click the next button here, and now it gives us a list of all of the interfaces in that in the iTunes library. If we just click generate, we can generate all of those. Okay, you notice the process is relatively quick, and we have ticks by all of these interfaces to show that they've been generated. So I now click finish, and let's go and find out what's happened. If we open the package browser, okay, and now we can go and try and find that iTunes library package that we've created. And you'll notice it's down here, iTunes lib. And let's look at the classes pane, and these are all of the classes that have been generated for us. Now the main interface class to the iTunes library is a thing called iTunes. So if we double click on that, we'll open a browser onto that, and we can see that we've got a number of methods that have been generated for us in this class. And the ones that you're intended to use, you can use any ones, including the private methods, but the ones marked with the green plus are the public methods. If I in fact click here to sort the class, you can see these are the public methods which you're intended to use when you're talking to this particular class. So one of the methods we're going to use in this demonstration is a thing called play file. Okay? And you notice that we have other methods, play the current track, pause the current track, etc. And also importantly, quit to quit when you've finished. So one of the great things about Smalltalk is you can now go into a workspace and you can do some interactive dialogue with this COM component, and it's a great way of learning about the features that are available in it. So let's open a Dolphin workspace. Okay, reposition this for us. And now we can talk to these classes. So let's create an instance of iTunes, and we'll do that and assign it to a workspace variable, which I'm going to call iTunes. And I want to use the iTunes interface, which we've generated, and we just send new to that. And if I do Control D, this will take a little bit of time because it has to launch iTunes in the background, and you should see the iTunes window pop up. There we go. And we also have this interface returned to us. I'll just hit delete to get rid of that. And now we can just do some experiments. Let's try and play the current track by sending play to it. I type Control E. Okay, and then you can hear the current track is playing. It's a Killers track. Let's now ask it to pause. Okay, so one of the things we said we wanted to do was to play a particular file. So let's ask iTunes to do that for us. So we're going to use the play file method, and I'm going to use a file open dialog to find the file we want to play, and we can then pass that over directly as a parameter to play file. So I can open a file open dialog by sending show modal to it, and if I now evaluate that with Control E, we get our open dialog, and it's actually already set to a directory called Hot Fuss, which is the name of a Killers album. And let's choose this track Somebody Told Me. Click open. Okay, let's try changing to the next track. Okay, and now let's pause. So now we've actually got some useful stuff we can do with this this interface. But one of the things we also might want to do is intercept some of the events that are triggered off it. Now, Dolphin gives you a fairly easy way of doing that. But what we need to do first of all is to create what's called an event sync, which is a target for these events to go to. So the first stage in doing that is to find the type info for the event sync, which will give us a definition of all the events that are triggered by the iTunes object. So let's create a workspace variable called sync type info. Okay, and let's ask iTunes to tell us what that is. So we're going to send code class type info and default source interface to the iTunes object, and this should yield us up a T-kind dispatch analyzer, which notice is called the iTunes events dispatch analyzer, and we can use this to tell us what the events are. Now, if we just inspect that by selecting it and saying inspect it, we get an inspector up, and if we look in the methods array associated with it, you see we have a list of all the events that are triggered by the iTunes object. The one we're going to be particularly interested in is this on-player play event here. So let's close that, and let's go and try and intercept that. So let's create an event sync, and this is of type AX event sync, and it has a target, which is going to be our iTunes object itself. And let me just stretch this out a little bit. Okay, and the type analyzer is the sync type info we just discerned earlier. Okay, and I'll now evaluate that. Okay, now let's ask it to connect to our iTunes object. No events will be received until we do this. Okay, we get a 1 back saying it's connected. Now, one other thing I'd like to do is I'm going to turn tracing on, and this will send a trace of all the events that are triggered to the Dolphin Smalltalk transcript. This is obviously just a debugging aid to show you what the events look like and what order they occur in. In a runtime application, you wouldn't turn this on because it would slow things down. But let's do that for now. It gives us some instruction. So in order to do that, let's talk to the event sync and say, is tracing enabled true? Okay. Now if I bring up the transcript window, and let's just reposition this a little bit. Okay, now let's ask iTunes to play the current track. Okay, and you see we get a number of events: on database changed event, on player play event, and on sound volume changed. If we play the next track, okay, let's pause that, and now, okay, so now let's try and actually intercept one of these events and do something with it. So if you remember, we chose to trigger the events off the iTunes object. Now what we want to do is receive one of the Smalltalk generated events, which has been generated from the ActiveX event, and the way to do that is to use the standard when messages. I'm going to use when perform here. Oops, excuse me. And we're going to, as I say, intercept this particular event on player play event. And on player play, notice it takes one parameter because it has a colon. So we're going to pass over a block here which takes one parameter. And I'm going to put in a halt just so we can break on that and see what's going on. So let me evaluate that. And let's cause iTunes to play again. And you notice we already get a hard-coded breakpoint. So if we go into that, let's just try and ask iTunes to pause again while we investigate that, so we don't have that going in the background. So we've arrived here in this event handler, and we've been passed over a dispatch object. Now we can actually find out what type that really is by asking it to downcast itself. So if we say x downcast and display that, you notice that we get an interface to a file or CD track, which is quite interesting because we should now be able to go and do something with that. So if I actually inspect that, okay, we can now see some of the attributes of it. The artist is the Killers. We see what the bit rate of the file is, what time it was added to the library, what the album name is. So we've got quite a lot of information there. So let's see what the name of the track is. Andy, You're a Star. What an appropriate track name that is. So what we can do now is we can use that to parameterize the whatever we do with this event. So let's go back to our original workspace window. Okay, I'm going to ask it to forget that event handler. So I can say iTunes remove all events triggered. Okay, and let's, instead of doing a self halt, let's edit this again and let's put up a message box to say we're playing a particular track. So let's do message box, notify, and we can say that the caption string is track changed, and we can say we're now playing. We can say we've actually been passed a track parameter, and the notify string is track name, and we can say append. Let's prepend. Now playing. Okay. So what we expect to get here is a message box popping up saying we're now playing a particular track name. Okay, let's see if this works. Let's evaluate this. Okay, and now let's ask iTunes to play. And there we go, we get that nice little message box. Click OK to that. Ask it to play the next track. There we go. So, I hope that has given you some idea about how to create an interface to a COM object and to do some experimentation with it. In a subsequent video, I think what I'm going to try and do is to use this iTunes interface and create an MVP playlist player. But for the time being, I think that's good enough for now. One final thing to do is to ask iTunes to quit. And so if we send quit to it, you'll see that the iTunes window at the back disappears. Okay, thanks for listening and watching, and I will see you again soon, I hope.